Hello, and welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
This is the podcast about murders and so much more. We will talk about anything strange, anything that goes bump in the night, and pretty much anything that amuses us.
And on that note, we need to mention that this podcast is not safe for work or delicate ears, so do be discerning who you listen to it with.
We also want to let you know that you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, so look for us there.
I am Shannon Lawrence. I am a writer, mom, wife, student, procrastinator, and you can find me at thewarriormuse.com.
My name is MB Partlow. I am a writer, an avid reader, an organizer extraordinaire, a mom to kids, cats, and a dog, and I call bullshit when I see it. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
And welcome to the middle of our conversation.
Yeah. I had to pause before I started this because well, it's been like 2 weeks or something since we saw each other.
Things to
so
talk
we were sitting
about.
there talking, then I was like, well, now that we've talked about half the stuff we could have talked about on the podcast, why don't we go ahead and get started?
But don't worry, we will never run out of things to talk about.
No, we can babble.
As long as Idris Elba is alive.
There's someone to talk about. As long as there are men on this planet, that's what we talk about.
That's true. And Alice and Janney.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people. We could just name names of people that we're happy to talk about. That would be really boring.
What I'm really wishing for right now is a little oxygen because the smoke is so bad right now.
Oh yeah, so we did a little mini family trip to Breckenridge. I hated the town of Breckenridge. I didn't like the people in it. Now the employees were nice, so I don't know if it was tourists that were major dicks or if it was locals that hated tourists. We got honked at in a crosswalk. Somebody tried to run us over in the crosswalk, and we had the right of way, and they were trying to turn left. Here's how close they got to me. I had to take one step back to push my daughter forward because they were just coming with us in the crosswalk. And all I had to do was turn around, and I pounded on their window and told them to open. Bitch wouldn't even look at me. I was so mad.
I'm a little surprised you didn't pick up a rock in here.
Well, I was in the middle of the street. But yeah, they were just, I didn't like it. I didn't like the feel. But, oh my God, it's so gorgeous.
I felt that way about Glenwood Springs. When we went there, it was so...
uppity.
Yeah, it was so, okay, we have this little downtown that we would like you to restrict yourselves to.
Yeah.
And...
that's how Steamboat Springs was, too.
And it was very... very not... But see, we usually go to Buena Vista.
Yeah.
And we love it there.
Which is a much more laid back and friendly mountain town versus, I don't know if it's ski towns, because Steamboat Springs is also a ski town, which I forgot. True. But yeah, I've been other places and loved it. But when you're driving in there, there's so much water and the trees were so green and it was, we had fog as we were coming down, as we were lowering elevation. I love it so much. So,
water in the air?
We got to the house it was an Airbnb. We got to the house we were renting and I was like, can we just see if they'll sell it to us? Or there was a creek in the backyard with 2 waterfalls.
Oh.
Like, it was absolutely stunning. Okay. I've lived in Colorado since I was 12 years old and I have been wanting to see a moose in person.
Yes.
Forever. I've been to Estes Park. I don't know how many times. I've been since Hot Pikes Peak. And every time it's like somebody else is always like, oh, so a moose here and here. And I'm like, well, fuck you, first of all. And second of all, why can't I just see a moose? So we pull up to our rental house, frickin' mama moose and a baby right there. And I was like, and what's funny is I had told Jeff, I was like, I'm determined to see a moose on this trip, right? And I said, maybe here's the thing. Maybe I'm not going to see a moose until we find the town we're supposed to live in the mountains. Because, I mean, our thing right now is eventually we want to move to middle of nowhere in the mountains. And, like, we are on that was driving back to the house. Mm-hmm. And then we get there and there's moose. And I was like, but I don't like Breckenridge. But we drove up to Frisco. Mm-hmm. Which is another little town. It's like 6.5 miles from Breckenridge. Completely different feel. And there was a cute little bookstore there. So in Frisco, so in Breckenridge, there's this massive downtown, and it is just teeming with people. Mm-hmm. They were like ants. They were everywhere. They were just crawling everywhere. And I have to say, we went to some very nice restaurants. And the people at the ski resort, very nice. But we go to Frisco and they have blocked off parts of the main street so that there's no cars. So people can just walk around.
Oh, nice.
And we had breakfast there. That's how we did, because we had done it. And I said, I want to drive to Frisco because people are telling me it's different and that I might like it. And sure enough, it was so different. But I went to the little bookstore. We each bought a book. And I was like, Jeffrey, the bookstore is hiring. You want to move here? I can work at the bookstore.
Oh my God, you're as bad as I am. Joe used to swear every time we went someplace that I had never been, I would look at him after about 2 days and go, I could live here. So that happened. We honeymooned in New Orleans. So after about 2-3 days, I looked at him and I said, I could live here. And he goes, why don't we wait and reevaluate that at the end of, because we had a few more days. And at the end, I was like, I could visit here. I've lost my ability to deal with that much humidity and that many people and that much trash. It's worse now, I think, in New Orleans than it used to be. But because the whole big thing of taking your drink with you, which I am all for that. I'm all for public drunkenness. I am all for taking your big drink down the street. But it's all in these giant plastic... It's all this plasticware, and nobody's taking that shit home. They're all throwing it in the river, and they're throwing it down in the streets. And even if they're throwing it in the garbage, it's just going in the trash. It's not being recycled.
Right.
And that much blatant waste just irritates me in a way it didn't before. Maybe I just wasn't as drunk last time I went there.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, like I've already said on here in New Orleans, I'm glad I went. I've wanted to go forever. Not my place. I mean, I'm sure stuff surrounding it would be my place, but I don't like a lot of people. Yeah. It's not my bag.
I get it. I do get it.
So, yeah.
There are things I won't do anymore because I'm like, people.
Yeah. For real. That's actually becoming a bigger and bigger thing for me, though.
Like people, I have never understood this one, though. People who want to go spend New Year's Eve in Times Square.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, there are 8 million people there. There's no place to go to the bathroom. Everything is overpriced. And did I mention all the people and then no bathrooms?
And by the way, there's no bathroom.
There's no bathroom.
No porta potties. You know what? Put porta potties all around.
Older you get, the more you care about the bathroom facilities, I believe.
Yeah.
It becomes very important.
I will say, we left breakfast and we went to the bookstore and I went to this little home furnishings place there in Frisco. And then it was time to go and I was like, we were walking back to the car and I'm all, I have to go to the bathroom and I don't know what to do about that. Because we had a 3-hour drive ahead of us. And so we saw this restaurant and their hostess wasn't at the stand and I just went into the restaurant and walked back and found the bathroom and walked back out.
Did they not have a McDonald's?
No. There was no fast food in Frisco.
Oh, wow.
The only fast food I saw in Breckenridge was a Subway. I didn't see anything else. But
we have... I'm like, wait a minute. When is this episode coming out? We will have just attended, when this comes out, the St. Arnold's Beer Festival over on the west side of town. We bought the VIP tickets for one reason and one reason only. You get to go inside to use the bathroom. You don't have to use the porta potties. Now, it also includes lunch and special beers and a shaded patio and all this stuff with the VIP ticket. But the selling point for me was I get to go and use the indoors bathroom.
My husband and I were talking about it because neither of us is a big drinker. And I'm like, sometimes I just want to go sit on a patio somewhere. But you can't do that if you're just going to have an iced tea.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I covet that drinking thing.
I'll go.
Where you can go sit and have a drink.
I will go with you because you can sit with me. I will order the beer. You can have whatever.
Oh, you saw the pictures. So I left my phone on a gondola.
Oh my God. That was hilarious. The nipple picture was disturbing.
It's a very large man nipple.
It is. It's big.
So anyway, some people found it and they found my phone and they had a lot of fun with it, but they turned it in.
Yes.
So I get my phone because we walked away from the gondola to a restaurant because we decided to leave our car there so that we didn't have to try and park on Main Street. Because we had a big free parking lot that we were in. Get all the way to the restaurant, and I go, oh, crap, I don't have my phone. So then I walk all the way back. So it'd been about 10 minutes. And I'm like, hi. I am an idiot and I left my phone on the gondola. What can we do about that? I have no idea which number I was on because it's like a little number on the front. Why would I look at that? And he goes, oh, I just got a call from one of the stations up above because there's like 3 stations it stops at. They've got your phone. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, oh, you want me to see if they'll send it down? And I was like, sure. And if not, I'll give you my information and I'll get my phone tomorrow. You know, I'm not going to die without my phone. And so they say, all right, we're going to send it down. So I think I was there for like half an hour waiting while it cycled down. And anyway, I get it. And I walk back to the restaurant and I sit down and I open my phone because my mom, there was a text from my mom. And it says, I'm confused. And I'm like, what? So I opened that up. And she had sent me a text message about something, and whoever found my phone had, because it's locked, but you can click on like a text that's up and pull it up without entering the code, and they text you back, found the phone. I'll turn it in. And she's like, what? So then I had to text her, and then I opened my pictures, and they had taken like 40 pictures.
And the first one was
the inside of a dog's mouth.
That was hilarious.
Yeah, there's just all these goofy things with them doing like the perspective tricks with their fingers around the next gondola and just goofy stuff and pictures of them being goofy with the dog. But yeah, the very first picture they took was some dude pulling his shirt down and showing his nipple.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, that's weird.
That's a little disturbing. But
so I posted those pictures public and told people if they know the people to tag me because they seemed like they might be Coloradans. Call me crazy. Also, they had a dog. By the way, Colorado is a dog-heavy place. Yes, always has been. It's kind of anti-cat here in some ways. Breckenridge was like 3 times the number of dogs. Every restaurant we went to, there were dogs everywhere. And then like the one we sat at, the dogs kept barked at everybody who walked by. And I was like, okay, you're an asshole for bringing dogs like that.
Yes.
To a restaurant. So we got to listen to a dog barking.
It's like the people who take, because I go to the farmer's market a lot on Saturdays, it's people who take their dogs, and some people have their dogs well controlled.
Right.
The other people have a 30-foot leash, and the dog is at the end of the leash, and they aren't paying one fucking bit of attention to where their dog is going or what their dog is doing. And I'm like, your dog did not wake up this morning and say, hey,
I really wish I could go to a farmer's market.
I would love some fresh vegetables. Let's go check out the cantaloupes, shall we?
I do always wonder like that. I'm like, listen, your dog, like the dog was so stressed out that was barking at everybody. It didn't want to be surrounded by all those people. And I'm like, you think that you're being good to your dog and you're not.
No, not putting your dog in that situation.
I think that whenever I see somebody who's taking their dog to like a really crowded place and I'm like, I don't think your dog is enjoying this at all. Why did you think this was a good idea? I take my dog with me everywhere I go. Jeff was like, we need to start leashing the cats and bringing them.
I didn't even take my kids with me everywhere.
Right?
We have a woman on our street who has a big cat and it's trained. It wears a harness and walks on a leash.
There was one in Manitou Springs on a leash. The dude was just sitting there selling like drawings or something and his cat's so chill. This is a big old gray tomcat.
Yes.
On his harness.
I see her walking up and down the street sometimes. Now, granted, it is a very slow walk. Because if you... it is because the cat's just wandering around, sniffing, and every time I'm like, Joe, the next time we have a cat, we have to train it to a harness so we can walk it on a leash. And he just looks at me, nods, okay, honey.
Our orange tabby was willing to, we still didn't take him places, but he was willing to be on a harness. But the thing is, if he wasn't on a harness, he would just follow us where we went. Like I would go for walks and he would just follow me. So it's not like he needed it. My parents tried to take our Siamese when I was a kid to the beach in Oregon. So she was on this leash and then she just laid there because she didn't like the leash. And so they're like pulling her along the sand until they finally just picked her up. Dusty, her name was.
And she was dusty.
She was very dusty that day.
Somebody I know just posted on Facebook, does anybody have any advice for taking a cat tent camping?
But why?
Most people just responded, don't.
Right. Leave your cat at home.
Did your cat
it's happy.
ask to go to camping? I don't.
Yeah, I don't. My cats stay here. They can survive for a long time as long as I leave them enough food and water. First thing I did was change the cat boxes when I got home. But anyway.
Okay, so what are we gonna talk about? Books or movies first?
What would you like to talk about? Are you just spoiling?
We have actually watched 2 of the same movies.
Yeah.
And it's kind of astounding because usually I'm about 47 years behind on anything that comes out. So there are two fairly recent movies that we've both watched.
Yeah. The Tomorrow War.
So did you like it? Yes.
I did.
I did too.
I felt like there was an ending and then there was another 30 minutes of movie.
There was, because they had to work that twist in.
Yeah.
That's
and
all
I
I'm
was
gonna say
like,
about that.
but it just felt so done then I got bored because when a movie does that, then I'm done. I'm done when it ended. I've seen a lot of complaints about the Tomorrow War though, but I liked it.
What were the complaints?
You know, like every time there's a sci-fi movie involving time travel, there's going to be people that are like, this is inaccurate because blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, if you don't, you know that you're going to have a problem with it, either don't watch it or figure out how to shut your brain off.
Yeah. And if you haven't time traveled, how do you know? How do you know how it works? Fucker. Shut up.
And my thing is time travel will never make sense to me because I see the errors in it. So I purposely shut off my brain to watch it. I'm like, I'm not even going to try and rationalize this.
No. The other movie that did it was the second Hellboy movie. Loved the first Hellboy.
Yeah.
The second Hellboy had about 87 character arcs or plot arcs, and each came to an ending. And I'm like, oh, movie's over. No, it just kept chugging right along. And I'm like, but that was a perfect end point. And I was watching it with my niece, who was actually went to school for film after that. But it was like, yeah, okay, the film's ending now. No, not this time either.
No. Oh.
And so we'd get to something, we'd be like, do you think this is really the... No, this is not the end either.
It does tell you that there are definitely supposed to be beats. As a writer, you know, there are beats in that. But, yeah, I still liked it. It was more dramatic than I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I figured out the twists before each time. But not so far in advance that it ruined it, we'll say.
Yep.
But, yeah, in general.
It's like I like a movie when I can figure out the twist enough ahead of time so that I feel smart, but not so far ahead of time that it ruined it.
I will say that I felt like there was a bit of commentary to it, and them just straight up sending people as, you know, human.
Just picked
they were like,
anybody.
You get a couple days of training, then we send you into the future to die. Like, there wasn't even this. It felt like they weren't even trying. It was cannon fodder, and I was like, "Oh, is this the Vietnam of the future?" Like,
it was very cannon fodder. And what struck me was, you see that. So somebody comes from the future and says, "There's this war, and we need bodies, or else there's not going to be a future. The planet's going to die. The human race will die." And so you see these people marching off to war, but they are every age. I mean, they're not children.
Every age, every job.
But yeah, it's like sending a...
Well, there were much older people that were sent.
Yeah, it's like send a 67-year-old baker to fight these...
And I was like, instead of sending wave after wave after wave when you fail, why didn't you just gather a bunch of people together and actually train them for real?
Yeah.
And take that time, because obviously there was time to do that, and then send them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so there are flaws.
Yes.
But at the same time, I could understand we would be stupid enough to do that.
Yes.
Which was my thing. I was like, yep, sounds like America.
Sounds
right
like
there.
We would do.
Let's just do this stupid hasty thing.
Well, and it wasn't
and not prepare. So it wasn't so much a flaw of the movie. It was
and it wasn't just us, because it was the whole world. Was sending people. The whole planet.
But we only saw...
Right. And I'm like, well, let's not focus on how this could pull the world together, because let's not be too optimistic.
No.
But no, I did like it.
Good.
I did. And the other one, I don't think we talked about it last time.
What?
Gunpowder Milkshake.
Oh, yeah. I was going to talk about that next time. Now you took away my movie.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
I liked that one a lot, too.
I wanted more of the... So, okay. I kept it was compared to Expendables. It was compared to John Wick. I saw a lot of Kill Bill to it.
Yes.
So that one was the one I thought of big. But I wanted more of the Expendables element, which was when you run into the three older women. Carla Gugino.
Yes.
Michelle Yeoh.
Yes.
I don't know how to say her name. And, of course, Angela Bassett, the goddess. And I wanted more with them, is the thing.
I agree.
But the thing about Gunpowder Milkshake, it was so clever They did so many things I've never seen in an action movie before, and I can't think of an example. But I mean, like, I turned to Jeff at one point and was like, my God, that was so smart. What they just did there, like, what they worked out with this. There were new dilemmas. There were new... It wasn't the same action movie.
No.
Over again.
No, it was not. It was... And I liked the way... I can't remember the main character's name. The way it showed her how she got into this, how she got involved as a child.
Yeah.
And how everything worked out.
Which, oh no, I don't know the actress's name, but she's Cersei.
Oh, was she?
Game of Thrones.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't watch Game of Thrones.
Oh.
I'm
So I actually like the actor. I mean, you hate her guts in Game of Thrones, but the actress is really intriguing.
I'm the last person on the planet who doesn't have HBO Max, but I'm going to fix that.
All right. We have somebody else's. It's payment for tech work my husband does as we get access to their HBO.
I like it.
So
what movie were you going to bring up?
Well, I already did the Tomorrow War.
No, I thought you said there was another one we both watched. That wasn't.
No, you did.
Oh, sorry. I'm just confused.
Damn it. But
it's unusual for me to watch a lot of TV, but sometimes you got to. So I also watched The Losers, which is from 2010.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause I was like, why haven't I heard of this movie? Is this new? No, it's 11 years old. Like, how the hell
Jeffrey
was it?
Dean Morgan.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan, he's so handsome. And Zoe Saldana, Chris Evans, and Idris Elba.
Yeah.
Love.
Good. Good.
Yeah,
shot.
I could have turned the sound off and watched that one.
Just like, you go ahead. You do your thing, gents. I'll be right here.
The one thing I will say, so if you haven't seen that movie in particular, it's another action movie, and the guys are all part of this squad that's in another country, and they're trying to assassinate someone, and they're calling in an airstrike. They're setting up to call in an airstrike for some horrible person to be killed. And they call in the airstrike, and then the evil guy brings in a busload of children. Mm-hmm. So they try to call off the airstrike, and the people that in the U.S. military that they're reporting to refuse to call off the airstrike. So they, of course, do this daring, they run in and shoot a bunch of people and rescue the kids and happen to find a handy school bus that they can drive.
Yeah.
All the kids. Like, fuck, that's so handy.
It's so convenient.
So they get to the helicopter. So the helicopter has come in to pick them up. And this is all like, the first 10 to 15 minutes of the movie.
It's the big intro.
Yeah. So they run across the field with all these children, and the guy goes, I can't take your team and the children. So they load all the children into this helicopter to be flown to safety. And the helicopter goes up in the air, and they can hear, because they still have their earpieces in, they hear the kill order given for them to be killed. But the people who are ordering this strike, the U.S. military, doesn't realize that the guys aren't on the chopper. They don't realize it's full of the children. So the children are killed, and the guys all walk up and pull off their dog tags and throw them in the rubble so everyone will think they're dead. And then the rest of the movie is their comeback and revenge.
Yeah, I think I liked it better on, subsequent watches than I did the first time.
I couldn't...
Because I could just enjoy the humor.
Yes, and there was a great... Chris Evans, he was this wannabe ladies' man. He was always trying out these lines on women who just looked at him like, what is wrong with you? And they weren't like super gross lines. They were just super corny.
Yeah. Chris Evans, I'm not a Captain America fan. I loved him before that and all the other stuff he did. I'm going to throw out there, I've been watching, now this is, I may have even talked about it before, but there was a new season of Working Moms. It's on Netflix. Oh, it is such a good, it's one of those irreverent comedies that I love. That's sort of women, but yeah, they're all working moms and it's what they're dealing with, but it's freaking hysterical. Watch that on Netflix.
I'll have to look for that. So what have you been reading?
Now you mentioned one of our other books, and when I went to look for that book, I found this one, I think. Italian School for Assassins by Melissa Yee. Because I remember sending you a link and going, hey, if you liked her other book, this sounds like you might like it. But
Italian School for Assassins.
yes, it's totally goofy, funny. And
I haven't read it yet.
Woman goes through a breakup or whatever, and she decides for her birthday she's going to do something big, so she signs up for a school for assassins in Italy. And she gets there, and there's just this bizarre assortment of characters that are at this school for assassins. Like this one really badass woman who just doesn't like her from the beginning. This set of super freaky twins that like. And everybody else there is a sociopath, and she's not. You know?
Oh my gosh,
and so they're doing all these things, and she's just failing at it because this is the orientation. You're supposed to show up. She shows up, she can't see anybody. So then she's already dinged because they're all hiding in the room.
Oh my God.
But then something's happening that's outside of the school, and like somebody's trying to kill her, and she wakes up to her roommate bed, which is the badass woman, which is not a spoiler. It happens right at the beginning. And then she's like, oh shit. Because then she gets arrested for it and all this stuff. And there's her cab driver is like, who picked her up at the airport and dropped her off. First tries to talk her out of going there. And then he's like helping her. And then he's like some sort of super secret something. And she doesn't know what it is. But Melissa Yee, so funny. I laughed out loud while reading this. So totally recommend.
I will look for it because when you sent me the link, I looked it up and I went, "Oh, I need to read this." My to be read piles are legendary.
I quite enjoyed it. I think it might be a series.
I don't
know. I don't remember. Her other one's a series.
Yeah,
I don't remember what it was because I didn't read that one.
Med student, Canadian.
Okay, what have you been reading?
I read. Oh my God! I discovered Grady Hendrix, and I'm just. Deeply.
Did you read the new one yet? I haven't read it. My Best Friend's Exorcism?
That's not even the newest one. No. So I did read My Best Friend's Exorcism first, which is set in, is it South Carolina? It's set in the South. We'll say South Carolina. I'm not positive. Don't hold me to that. But it's I want to say it's set in the early 90s, and it so perfectly portrays this group of like mid-high school teenagers. Mm-hmm. And it really, I thought, did an outstanding job portraying a deep friendship between two girls.
Okay.
That aspect alone. And I'm like, how is this man writing these teenage girls, not only believably, but so well and so in depth. So then I picked up the latest one, which is called The Southern Book Club's Guide. Where did I write it down? The Southern Book Club's Guide to Killing Vampires.
Yes. I haven't read that one either, but I know of that one.
Slaying Vampires. So that is set in the same town, but it's years later. So you know how in a Charlie Brown cartoon, you've got the kids and then the parents are just wah, 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 wah. So My Best Friend's Exorcism is sort of like that. It's all from the kid's point of view, and you don't really, you see the parents here and there, but they aren't really having a big impact on the story.
Yeah.
Flip it around in the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. It's all about these women, these moms. And this one is from the parents' point of view, so you don't get the kids' point of view.
Oh, okay.
And it's, again, for that time and that place, and the women raised a certain way to be a certain kind of wife. It is absolutely spot on. And the way and it's Southern. So there's a certain way there's the societal ranking, who ranks where, mm-hmm. and how you treat other people. And it's just, and race comes into it. And
now you had said, because in the past, Horror Store and whatnot, mm-hmm. Grady has been tongue-in-cheek. Now, I seem to recall you saying on here, you talked about My Best Friend's Exorcism, mm-hmm. and said that it was far more serious than you expected it to be. It wasn't his usual comedic. So how about this one? Was this one more serious, or was his tongue-in-cheek there?
Well, I think all of his stuff has a little bit of that tongue-in-cheek. But no, this is more like Best Friend than it is like Horror Store.
Okay.
So
he's just basically taken a somewhat more serious bent in his writing of late.
At least in these two.
Okay.
At least in these two books. But I really, really liked them. And there's also this element, the main character's husband is a doctor. I want to say, I can't remember what kind of doctor, but he's a big, important doctor. And when this whole thing about the vampire comes out, the interaction between them and the impact on their marriage and how he wants to treat her and whether he believes her or doesn't believe her, or it's just a whole thing. And it's fascinating. And it's so, I know literary writers who can't do a relationship that well.
Wow.
Who can't show you the facets without sitting down and saying, this is what he's doing.
Yeah.
It's just, I can't say enough good about this book.
I need to read his last two. Yeah.
Yeah. Those were really good. Did you read We Sold Our Souls?
No.
Another Grady Hendrix.
Oh.
And this one is about, there are a lot of people who will enjoy that book more than I did. I did like it, but it's about heavy metal. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the heavy metal. There are a lot of groups, granted some are fictional, but there are a lot of real groups listed that he's talking about in this book that don't hit with me because that's not music I listen to.
Well, since we're talking about Grady Hendrix, I did read his Dead Leprechauns and Devil Cats, and I just can't remember if I mentioned it on here before, but I haven't got it crossed out on my list. So.
Dead Leprechauns
and Devil Cats. So it's a collection. It's this group. It's set back in the past. And what he does is he's using the stories. He has this whole intro that I read about it. He's using these stories to show some of these awful things that happened in the past that we gloss over. Kind of in the formation of the country type thing. So, for example, this is a collection of short stories, and each one, the main characters, though, are this group of people who are, snobbish, and so they look down on the people that he's kind of commenting on. So, for example, one of them involves Chinatown.
Okay.
Back in, I think they're in New York. So the big Chinatown that was there, and gangs, there were these gangs between them. And so the club, they're like, is looking down at these Chinese characters the whole time, but they get embroiled in this whole incident, right? And so you're not supposed to like necessarily the narrators, interestingly, or the narrator. I think it's one character from this group. But anyway, yeah, it goes in there, and then at the end, he has the history if you want to read the real history of it.
Oh.
And if you get the ebook, it says on there, I will continue to write these stories and I will add them so it will be updated to your ebook as we go. But
I must have it.
Yeah. And I just bought it because the title was funny, you know, but it's not really funny, again, like the other thing.
Right.
So, but he's like, this is stuff that most people don't know about that happened. That's just this injustice that, so anyway, it's interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to go first or shall I?
Up to you. Usually you go first.
Okay. I'll go first then. So I did, and just so people know, it's not like serial killers and stuff this time, but both of our stories are dark in different ways. Here we go. This is for affiliate stuff.
Yes.
So, and it's Buzzsprout, which is awesome because that's who we use. Buzzsprout does the podcast. They're a podcast host. They get it out to people. They actually have all this training.
They really do make it very easy.
I have used them for so much stuff, just setting this up. They have digital mastering, which we just started using. So hopefully you're seeing the fruits of that because I'm a lay person. Everything I'm doing, I've learned from them, but like editing and stuff like that, I just don't have the time to learn how to do the really deep stuff.
Yeah.
There will be a link in our show notes at any time. What happens is if you click on that link, say if you wanted to start a podcast and you're interested in checking all this out and you wanted to sign up, you could actually give us a little kickback. It's just a little tiny one, but it helps. It basically will pay for a month of what we're paying for right now just to do this. And you would get, after your second paid invoice, a $20 Amazon gift card. So you support the show, and you also, with a paid plan, get some money for Amazon. And it's win-win, especially with Buzzsprout.
Yeah.
And that's just at buzzsprout.com.
One thing I really like, because we both get them, they send you so many encouraging emails.
Oh, yeah.
They tell you, you've had your 25th download.
Here we get it, and it's a little image with the reward.
Yeah, it's so supportive and nice and friendly.
They're fantastic. They make it so easy. They are all about helping you succeed. It's amazing.
Yes.
So it's awesome. And it's really inexpensive.
Yay. Yay.
So I did the Silent Twins. And I'm just going to do a shout out to Linda Shappett because I had this on my list, but she tagged me in a thing online about it. And she was like, have you heard this one? It'd be good for the podcast. So I'm calling it a request. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to bump that up. So I did.
Cool.
My sources, Wikipedia, All That's Interesting, Bizarrepedia, StoryPick, and The New Yorker. And I'm just going to say now, the New Yorker article was a really good one. It was done fairly recently. And it went into the nuances of this case that I really can't, that involved race and other problematic issues. So, highly recommend that because it'll be in our links. Anyway, June and Jennifer Gibbons were born April 11th, 1963 to immigrants who had moved from Barbados to the UK. Their parents are part of what was referred to as the Windrush generation, and I looked that up. It was people living in the West Indies who immigrated to what they called their mother country at the time in the UK, looking for a better life. This was encouraged by the British Nationality Act of 1948. Now, it was after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
They had a shortage of workers because cannon fodder. And so they decided they would give citizenship to anybody in their colonies and let these people know that they were welcome to move out there and get jobs. So they got more people for the labor market, and there was a large group of people from the West Indies. They basically came on ship. It was one big transit of people.
Okay.
And they took these jobs and they had these opportunities. And anyway, this is not what it's about. So if anybody wants to read about it, look up the Windrush generation, because this ultimately led to a lot of segregation issues then later in the UK, because people were like, well, now they're taking our jobs. And so there was this whole, do we have to discourage them from being here? And then the racism. The girls had an older sister and brother, plus eventually a younger sister named Rose. And I only name her because she comes up later. They were born in Yemen because after their father moved out there, he actually was able to go into the RAF. He was in their Air Force. And so he got moved around a lot. But then ultimately they came back to Wales, and that's where the girls were brought up. Their parents soon noticed that the girls didn't want to communicate with anyone other than each other. So they were delayed talkers to begin with. And then they made up their own language, which is called, idioglossia is a language that only a few people speak. And so it tends to be used for twins who make up a language because that's not uncommon.
Right. I've heard of that.
But they also mirrored each other's movements. They had to be together all the time. And that's called cryptophagia.
Oh.
So there are some new terms for people. So they made up their own language and they did the same movements and very much mirrored each other. And they ended up isolating each other more and more from other people, including they didn't talk to their siblings, they didn't talk to their parents after a while. They would actually write notes to their parents after a certain age.
Okay.
For example, there was one, it was like, we want to watch such and such show at 7 p.m. tonight. Please leave the door to the living room open and don't be in there. Okay. So later on, one person was able to convince them, even though they wouldn't talk to her, can I record when I'm out of the room? And they said they let her do it. And so she was listening to it, and it was a combination of English and then their language from Barbados. And it turned out it was this very fast, they spoke very fast. And it was this version they called Bahan Creole, which was what they were speaking from back there. The family spoke English in the home, but the girls knew both languages. So, but they did communicate with Rose. They would speak to their little sister, Rose.
Huh.
They loved her a lot. She came after them. So they could speak normally, but they chose not to. In school, they refused to read or write after a certain point, but somehow the school just kind of allowed them to continue on. They were like, well, they're not getting in trouble. It turns out, like that New Yorker article, they pointed out, they were the only black kids at the school.
Oh.
Only.
Oh.
And they faced a lot of bias because of that. And so they think the school was just like, shrug, whatever. That's the best that those people can do. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So anyway, they did get bullied a lot. In fact, it got so bad that the school started releasing them early so that they had time to get home before the other kids were let out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Which That's your solution instead of trying to do something about the bullying? But okay. Now, part of that was because they were the only black kids there, but the other part was because they didn't talk to anybody. And so if you're different, you're going to get picked on that way too. But they said that people would pull their hair and stuff like that. Again, ask them, why is your hair different? You know, thing you hear about over and over and over because, yeah. So for the most part, the school just kind of let them do their thing. They're just like, whatever, and just kept moving forward. But in 1974, a medic who came to the school to give them vaccinations was surprised, like struck by how odd they acted, because they both came up and he always tried to prepare them for the vaccination. And the girls, neither of them, they were just both in a row, neither of them reacted to the vaccination anyway. And it was supposed to be a painful vaccination. I don't remember which one it was for. And he said they were like dolls, you know, they were just empty-eyed, weren't responsive, didn't speak to him, didn't really meet his eyes, nothing. They just zombied up and got their vaccination moved on. So he went to the headmaster, and the headmaster was like, they're not a problem. So as long as they're not causing me problems, I'm not going to do anything about it. So then that medic went to a local therapist, basically, and the therapist was like, no, they need to get in therapy right now. So they go to the family and they talk them into doing this, and they saw just this chain of different kinds of therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists, everything. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to get the girls to talk, and the girls wouldn't talk to any of them. They did notice that one of the twins seemed to hold power over the other. Now, they could never figure out which one was controlling the other one, but there was a journalist that ended up getting involved with them. Her name was Marjorie Wallace. And she felt that Jennifer was controlling June, and June seemed to want to talk to her, but she would get eye signals. They had an eye language when they were around other people. They would just communicate visually like that. And Jennifer would send signals if June seemed like she was going to talk. So Marjorie was convinced that Jennifer was the power twin. And the thing is, June was the one born first. Jennifer was 10 minutes later. Jennifer was stronger from the beginning, just dominant in personality and power and all of that. When told they would be separated, because ultimately these therapists said, well, we'll separate them and they'll start talking. There had been success with that with younger children, twins, that if they separated the twins, then they would develop their own personalities. So we're going to try this. And so this one doctor, it was his job to tell them, and they set on each other when they were told they'd be separated. They hitting each other, scratched, like one of them got scratched in the face.
How
they were
old
screaming.
Were they at this time?
I'm not sure. So 1974, and they were born in 1963. So we'll say 11. Yeah.
Wow.
And then they did start talking. They started begging, don't do this, don't separate us. We'll be good, we'll talk. But then they'd go to their therapy appointment and still wouldn't talk. So then the plan got put into play, right? So they separated them. They sent them to 2 different boarding schools. Bearing in mind, this is England, and so they were in a boarding school anyway at that time, but they were together. And they just both completely shut down. They were actually on the verge of catatonia. Like, they would have to prop one up in the bed at one point, and they said she was just stiff as a board. And they had to, feed them and all of this stuff. So eventually they were like, well, they're not eating, and we can't do this. We have to get them back together. And so they returned them home, where they became responsive. Now, they were done with school at 16.
Okay.
So at some point, it's kind of mixed in. The girls tried to kill each other multiple times, including incidents where Jennifer tried to strangle June, and June tried to drown Jennifer by throwing her from a bridge, and actually almost succeeded in killing her. And their journals, at one point when they were returned home for the Christmas present, their mom gave them each this red, leather journal with key and a lock on it. And they started journaling like crazy. And eventually experts were able to read those, and they let Marjorie Wallace read them, the journalist. And Marjorie, she wrote a book called The Silent Twins about them, ultimately. And she read through all of these journals, all these things that they wrote. She indicated that despite their closeness, which excluded everybody else, right? Both feared the other and felt they were holding each other back. Like, there was all this negative stuff about each twin. They weren't sharing their journals with each other.
Wow.
So I have a couple quotes. A quote from June's journal, bearing in mind she's the one that was less powerful in the dynamic. Quote, she wants us to be equal. There's a murderous gleam in her eye. Dear Lord, I'm scared of her. She is not normal. Someone is driving her insane. It is me. And then another one, nobody suffers the way I do, not with a sister. With a husband, yes. With a wife, yes. With a child, yes. With this sister of mine, a dark shadow robbing me of sunlight is my one and only torment.
Wow.
And then Jennifer wrote, quote, we have become fatal enemies in each other's eyes. We feel the irritating, deadly rays come out of our bodies, stinging each other's skin. I say to myself, can I get rid of my own shadow? Possible or not possible? Without my shadow, would I die? Without my shadow, would I gain life, be free, or left to die? Without my shadow, which I identify with a face of misery, deception, murder. So they have some pretty strong feelings about each other.
Yeah.
And as you might be able to tell from the way they wrote, in addition to journaling, the girls wrote fiction. So they wrote some things on their own. They wrote some things together. They were pumping out, because they weren't doing anything else. They were on disability or something like that. So they were pumping out short stories and novels and essays and poems, and they were writing plays, and they would enact them with their dolls in their room.
Wow.
While not talking to anybody. They stopped taking meals with the family. They didn't even interact with the family anymore, so food would just be dropped off in their rooms, which probably was not the best way to socialize, right? Their family just let them isolate themselves, basically, instead of trying to fix that. And it seems like they'd been isolated like that for so long without the family. The family didn't know what to do, so I'm not... trying to villainize them or anything, but their actions didn't help. They were able to use their own money, and they printed one of June's novels through a vanity press. Mm-hmm. And the novel was called Pepsi Cola Addict. And they thought that they could make it, right? And of course they didn't. So they started to get bored with this. But they would actually, one of the things they did too was they would record stories on tape for their little sister Rose.
Oh, okay.
So they'd read their stories on there for her. Wallace described their inner world as a fantastic one that proved that these girls, who many treated as zombies, were anything but. They were living these florid lives in their minds.
Right.
Most of their stories were set in the U.S. They had a big thing about Malibu or something like that. I think it was Malibu. Nope. And they involved people, beautiful people, getting themselves in trouble, and they were actually pretty grim and grisly.
Okay.
Most stuff like that. Pepsi Cola Addict is something about... I think it was a student getting involved with a teacher or something like that.
Wow.
So, at around age 18, they got involved with 2 American boys. The boys were the brothers of one boy who had defended them at school. He was the only person who defended them. And they decided to seek him out. So, all of a sudden, they were obviously going to interact with somebody. And they actually they looked him up and found his address and took a bus to go to his house. And they discovered, so this was interesting. When they got to his house, nobody was home, so they just went inside and hung out and started ate. And then the parents came home, and the girls tried to flee, and the parents caught them. But since the kids wouldn't talk to them, they felt bad for them, and they let them go without pressing charges. Well, then the girls started taking cabs and buses over there because they found out he still had 3 younger brothers that were there. The guy they were seeking had moved to Pennsylvania because they were 18,
right? So
he had moved back to America with other family.
Wow.
So they were so desperate for attention that they I read journal pieces that were in there, and I think it was June was describing that they were dressing up. They got wigs so that they'd be pretty because, their hair was so different from everybody else's.
Okay.
And they got wigs, and they would wear makeup and mini skirts and put on jewelry and go over and visit these boys, trying to get this attention from them.
Oh.
Yeah. And ultimately they did. They both ended up losing their virginity to each to a different brother. But then the rest of the family moved back to America.
Ooh.
They all up and went. And I will say the boys were cruel to them. They were kind of like they just showed up every day. They were pests following these boys around, so the boys took advantage of that. But anyway, when they moved, the girls were left alone. They both felt they were in love with the boy that they had slept with.
Right,
of course. So they lost it, and they actually went on this 5-week crime spree. They were breaking into places. They were stealing. They were committing small arsons. They were vandalizing things. They went all out. They would taunt the police. They tried to break a payphone and they couldn't. So they called the police from it and told them what they were doing and then fled before the police got there. They just all out. Okay. It was like a late teenage rebellion,
Yeah.
And they were doing drugs, and they were drinking a lot of alcohol, and they were sniffing glue, and they were all this stuff. They described it in one of their journals. So they got caught when they tried to burn. Now, this is 1981. They broke into a technical college and tried to burn it down, and they got caught in the process of like lighting it. So they weren't able to burn it down.
Oh my God.
So they're arrested, charged with 16 counts of burglary, theft, and arson. And then they were committed involuntarily to a high security psychiatric hospital. It was called the Broadmoor. It's apparently quite notorious. They were the youngest patients there.
Oh.
But the alternative was that they would go to prison. So it was thought this would be better. But there was a law at the time that they could be committed like this, and there was no end date. They weren't given an end date.
Oh, so it's not like a 72-hour involuntary hold.
Oh, no.
It was
you're here till they decide that you don't
we
need
feel
to be here.
like letting you go.
And what happens in hospitals like these when you have a fascinating case, you keep them around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because you want to be the famous one. Now, just so you know, this was a hospital for the criminally insane. They were there with the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, and people like him.
Oh, my
There
God.
was a notorious gangster that was there. These are all the criminals that had been found criminally insane and therefore needed to be in a hospital instead of a prison were there with these girls.
Oh, my God.
And the next oldest person after them, they're 18, was 25.
Oh, my God.
Or 27. I can't remember which. But anyway, so they're in there with terrible people.
Yeah.
And they have been isolated all of their lives. In fact, the last, 2 at least, spent in their bedroom not talking to anybody. And suddenly they're surrounded by these kinds of people. Okay. So they put them on various antipsychotic medications. And it ended up stymieing their creativity so they couldn't write anymore. Mm-hmm. They did lighten the medications enough so that they would at least start journaling again. So there's still journals from that time. And the medication ended up causing Jennifer tardive dyskinesia. It's a neurological disorder. It's repetitive involuntary movements.
Okay. I was going to say, I've heard of that, but...
Mm-hmm. And it also caused her blurred vision. So she seemed to have...
Oh, my God.
Like, more physical reactions to it than June. So normally, juvenile delinquents were given 2 years for crimes like the ones they committed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Gibbons twins spent nearly 12 years at the Broadmoor.
So 18 to 30.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
And this, again, was most likely race-related at the time. They were also the only, I think, black people in that facility. It was not a diverse area, Wales, at the time. So it's thought that a lot of the judgments and issues came down because for what they'd done, 12 years?
Yeah.
For setting some fires and stealing bicycles and some books. That's what they stole. We're not talking millions of dollars and jewelry and even thousands of dollars.
Yeah, they weren't boosting...
Hundreds of dollars.
They weren't boosting cars.
Right. And I think their vandalism was like graffitiing. So 12 years they spent in a high security hospital for the criminally insane. So in one of her interviews later, June was quoted as saying, "We got 12 years of hell because we didn't speak. We had to work hard to get out. We went to the doctor. We said, look, they wanted us to talk. We're talking now. He said, you're not getting out. You're going to be here for 30 years. We lost hope, really. I wrote a letter to the Home Office. I wrote a letter to the Queen asking her to pardon us to get us out. We were trapped. Nobody responded to them. The hospital said they would take turns starving while the other ate for 2. So like, one day they'd wake up and this one wasn't allowed to eat and the other one would just gorge herself.
Eat everything.
Yes.
Oh, God.
And they separated them because they would fight if they were together and they'd separate them. And even separated, they said it was eerie because they would find them sitting in the same positions and like doing the same things in their separate rooms on different wings. Wallace, the journalist, continued visiting the girls in the mental hospital. She really liked them. And she was quoted saying, I always liked being with them. They would have that wry little sense of humor. They would respond to jokes. Often we would spend our teas together just laughing. So nobody other than their little sister had earned their trust this way for them to talk to. They talked to Marjorie. They liked her. There's a bunch of pictures of her with them as adults, And so they let her into their little world. And that's why she ended up writing the book. Anyway, I mean, she went there with the intention. She was a journalist who heard about them, but then she ended up liking them and feeling for them. In March 1993, they were to be moved to a lower security hospital. It was going to be medium security. The twins told Marjorie that only one of them could leave the hospital. They felt neither could fully live until the other was dead and gone, and that the remaining twin would have to live a normal life for both of them. In fact, they seem to have had that opinion for a while. They felt like they were trapped together.
That is massively screwed up.
It's terrible. They didn't get the help
terrible.
they needed.
No.
So they told her when she came to visit them before the move that they had decided Jennifer was the one who must die. And that June was to live on for both of them. Yes, wow. The dominant twin, interestingly. Wow. So just before the transfer, Jennifer said she felt sick during the transfer. So anyway, I will say Marjorie Wallace went to the people running the hospital and said, I'm worried.
Right.
Because she realized they were serious about this, that one of them had to die. And the hospital kind of waved her off and said, we're keeping an eye on them.
Yeah.
They're here in our facility. They're fine. So anyway, just before the transfer, Jennifer says she feels sick. During the transfer, she became unresponsive. She said, we're about to be free from the Broadmoor. She laid her head in her sister's lap. She didn't talk anymore. And they get her to the new facility, and she's completely unresponsive. They rush her to the hospital, but it's too late. She died in her sister's lap. And they determined that there was an inflammation of her heart that hadn't been diagnosed. But it's actually still a mystery because they have no idea what this inflammation was from. Basically, she willed herself to die.
Yeah.
She was 29 years old.
Oh my God.
So sure enough, after her sister's death, June starts talking. She starts leading a normal life. She was free, so she missed her sister. And she says she spent like 5 years just crying and grieving her sister, and yet also being more free and talking to people. And she said in interviews that Jennifer had been acting strangely the day before their transfer, that she was slurring her words, that she was acting very tired, and that she kept saying she was dying. And their older sister, I think her name was like Greta or something like that. Years later, she's been quoted, she was like, she wanted to go after the hospital. She felt that the hospital killed her sisters. 12 years. She said they never should have been there in the first place. They shouldn't have been there as long as they were.
Right.
They shouldn't have been on these nasty medications that they were on because they were putting on major things at 18 years old. The parents just wanted to put it all to rest. They didn't want to fight.
Yeah, I was like, that's what I kept thinking was, where were the parents in all of this?
So when they were interviewed later, they said they felt that the British government, as they put it, they should trust the British government, and if the British government felt that this is what should happen, then it's what should happen. So they never fought. They never tried to get their daughters out. They never.
Oh.
Yeah. They just seemed so incredibly passive. But they were also going through societal things. And they would have been bucking against a system that looked down on them. So. And
they also didn't fight the girls themselves.
No, they didn't. I mean, they were just, very
like
passive
you said,
people.
passive is a good word for it.
So June Gibbons is still alive.
Oh, wow.
That New Yorker article is an interview with her. Yeah. When asked why she and her sister stopped talking to other people, she stated simply that it had been a pact between the girls. They'd made a pact at one point when they were being bullied and all of that, and that they weren't going to talk to other people. Wow. And she said, it started as a game, but the longer it went on, the more trapped we felt. So, like, they both felt the other one didn't want to stop. So they kept going. Oh.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
They got each other stuck in these awful cycles, is what they did. And then they didn't want it was like they lived for the other one. And sometimes they said there are a bunch of quotes in the journals. I am Jennifer. She is me. And that would be June writing that,
Right.
So there is a poem that June wrote that is on Jennifer's grave. We once were two. We two made one. We no more two. Through life be one. Rest in peace. And June actually still visits her sister's grave every Tuesday.
Wow.
She has never been able to get a good life. Even though she started acting normal, she didn't pursue her writing, which she wanted to be a writer.
Well, and she was held against her will from the ages of 18
for
to
almost half her life at that point.
18 to 30 almost.
Yeah.
That's insane. How could anybody be normal after that?
She lives on disability. She's tried to hold jobs. She has trouble getting them in the first place. She's on medication.
Wow.
You know,
I bet.
which, I mean, 12 years of their lives. And before that, just the isolation had to have been so incredibly damaging. In their formative years.
How do you learn how to deal with other people if you don't ever deal with other people?
No, not even your family, not forced. I mean, my daughter has autism and withdrew. And what have we been doing? Finding ways to get her involved and do things with us. Because if you let them isolate themselves, they'll completely shut down.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what they let these girls do. Clearly, there was something going on with them. And if somebody had cared enough to give them a treatment that would actually help them. Instead, it was like a battle of wills with all the doctors. It was, we need to make them talk, and they couldn't focus on anything else.
Yeah.
It's horrible how they were treated.
They were treating one symptom instead of looking for the cause.
And even that symptom, though, that's why it was like a power play is how I see it.
Yeah.
When your entire focus is not, let's help these girls with whatever's going on, but I'm going to be the one to make them talk. That's a power move. That has nothing to do with helping them.
Mm-mm.
Nothing. If you fix whatever the problem was, I bet they'd talk. So
funny how that works.
If anybody wants to read more about them, when the article said that the Silent Twins was out of print, but I went to Amazon, it's there. So by Marjorie Wallace, she wrote about them, and she, among all these other people, seemed to be the only one who gave a shit about them. Wow. So I imagine that it's a pretty even-handed book about them. I mean, she found them fascinating, but she genuinely liked them as people. And you can see that in the pictures that are on there of them. Just, she liked being around them. And they obviously liked being around her. There's pictures with them just smiling and talking to her.
Because she wasn't judging them.
No. So, anyway, it's not murder. It's not any of those things. But it's a sad, dark story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So I have a sad, dark story.
Yay!
To follow right along. This is also one I've been sitting on for a while. It was one of the first ones I thought, I should we both talked about, I should talk about this.
It's food.
Yes, it's the Great Molasses Flood. So my sources, which I sometimes forget to tell you, but I always put on Facebook, of course, Wikipedia, legendsofamerica.com, Southern Living, history.com, and Britannica.com.
Yay.
You never know where you're going to get. Although I
love
will
an encyclopedia.
I will say after a certain point when you got, with this story, once I got the basics, I was working really hard to find new stuff to add, and there just wasn't a whole lot. But, so this is the Great Molasses Flood. It's also known as the Boston Molasses Disaster or the Boston Molassacre.
I like that one. Use that one.
I like that one, but really I didn't find anybody using that one.
Damn it.
So, I like to set the scene.
You know what I'm going to put when I put the description for the episode?
The Boston Molassacre. So, this happened on January 15th in 1919. So, what you need to know is, because I'm not a historian, and I don't pretend to be one, but apparently, by all accounts, 1919 sucked in general in the U.S.
Okay.
It was...
Well, wasn't it following World War... What was World War I?
Well, there were race riots. Yes, race riots. There was a lot of violence. There were natural disasters. There were anarchist bombings. There were so many things I'm like, there's a cornucopia of things I could be talking about from the year 1919. So just so you know, Teddy Roosevelt died in his sleep at age 60. And so Woodrow Wilson was president. Prohibition came into effect in 1919. The Grand Canyon was established as a national park. The pop-up toaster was invented. That was like the one bit of levity in all of 1919. And the price of a postage stamp, first-class postage stamp, went from 2 cents to 3 cents. Gasp. Right? That was a 1/3 increase.
That actually is a big,
I know, it's a 50% increase.
Yeah.
So, January 15th, 1919. So, the Purity Distilling Company was located at 529 Commercial Street in the North End neighborhood of Boston. Or Boston. So, they had a molasses tank, which was 50 feet tall, 90 feet in diameter, and held approximately 2.3 million gallons of molasses, which is enough to fill 3.5 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So that's a fuck ton of molasses. Yeah. So, in case you're like me going, why does anybody need that much molasses? I did a little research just so I could...
It's the South.
It's Boston. It's Boston. That's not the South.
But the South needed it.
So, it was going past the South to get to Boston. Because it was coming by boat from the Indies. Anyway, stop helping. Stop helping.
But I have ideas.
So, what is molasses and why did Purity need so much of it? So, it's a byproduct of the sugar making process. Sugar cane or sugar beets are crushed. The juice is extracted and then it's boiled down to produce crystals, which are sugar crystals. And after the crystals are removed, the thick brown liquid that's left is molasses.
Huh.
See? Did you know all that?
I don't know. Maybe at one point, but certainly not now.
I know the things I've forgotten.
Right?
So, as for Purity, the Purity Distilling Company, molasses can be fermented to produce ethanol, which is, of course, in alcoholic beverages, but it's also used in munitions, dynamite, and other explosive. Who knew? I did not know. I don't know how dynamite is made. I did not look that up. I got so far over my head in science in this thing, it's not even funny. So Purity had a pipeline from this plant to their ethanol plant. So World War I had increased the demand for ethanol for munitions, and the company might have been racing against prohibition, which was passed the next day.
Oh.
So this happened on January 15th. It passed on January 16th and was put into practice by the end of the year. It didn't immediately. It took a while. So Boston had been experiencing a frigid cold snap, as one might well imagine in the Northeast, in New England.
What month was it again?
January.
Okay.
On January 15th, the temperature warmed to 40 degrees.
Wow.
Yeah. Balmy, one might say. So on the 14th, a fresh load of molasses had been delivered and filled this container, this tower, and to move the molasses from one place, from the ship into this tank, it had to be warmed to reduce viscosity, because you've heard slower than molasses. Well, it's a very thick, sticky liquid.
Right.
So it's thinner when it's warmed. So the theory is, one of the theories is that the older and colder molasses in the bottom of the tank reacted to the warmer molasses, causing thermal expansion. The tank ruptured at approximately 12:30 p.m. on the 15th, and witnesses felt the ground shake. They likened one of the sounds to gunfire because the rivets were just shooting out of this tank. And the crack and the roar as the tank gave way. So, to be all sciencey for a second, and this isn't even the... molasses is 40% more dense than water, which means the potential energy of a wave of molasses is more powerful and destructive than a wave of water the same size.
Yikes, because tsunamis are scary.
Yes. They use the word tsunami. They likened this to a tsunami. But
it's a molasses tsunami.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the molassacre. Okay, so at its peak, the molasses formed a wave 25 feet high and moving at 35 miles per hour.
Can you imagine how terrifying it would be to see that coming?
Yeah, so...
Briefly.
So, not everyone has good spatial awareness. I do not. So, to get the imagery, an orca whale is approximately 25 feet long. Most giraffes, a typical giraffe, is only 20 feet tall. So for my writer friends, that's slightly more than 27 sheets of paper. 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper stacked up. Hey,
Listen, that is not easier to picture than a giraffe.
I know, but
You had to do it.
I had to do it.
Okay.
So the speed works out to 51.33333 feet per second. So that means in a single second, it traveled a length equivalent to the height of a 5-story building, or slightly more than 3 car lengths. In a second. Mm-hmm. So this is a big fucking wall of brown, sticky, thick molasses traveling like a tsunami. So...
Sugar murder.
As a quick aside, a 2014 Scientific study showed that the reports of the height and speed of the molasses wave reported at the time were accurate. They built a scale model and they used corn syrup and had little cameras and little figures. Oh, hell yes.
They're like, we got a grant.
Yes. So what I'm trying to impress upon everyone with all of these factoids is that this is a horror movie.
It was utterly fucking terrifying.
It was a horror movie scenario, only it's real life. This is not... Where is Dwayne Johnson making the movie about this is what I want to know. Right? Right?
Yeah.
So, there was no warning either. Mm-mm. So, if you were near ground zero and in the path of the molasses, there was no escape because this shit was worse than quicksand. So, the force pushed steel panels of the burst tank into a nearby building. It tipped a streetcar off the tracks. The steel supports of a train platform were snapped. Surrounding buildings were pushed off their foundations and crushed. There was a firehouse where there was a pocket of air that the firemen were trapped in. And they got most of them out. One of them drowned, couldn't survive and drowned. Men, women, and horses and children drowned because they couldn't escape it. Because the more you thrashed and struggled, the more it held you. Mm-hmm. The more covered with it you got. And here's something else that I found absolutely... It's one of those little details that makes you go, huh? And then makes you go, oh my God, that's so horrible. So when you have something big moving, there's a rush of air ahead of it. Yeah. So it was sweet smelling air.
They're like,
because it smelled like molasses. Yeah. And so it picked people up and hurled them, or it drove loose debris ahead of it, and that injured people. A truck was blown into Boston Harbor by the air ahead of it. Wow. So, and it can get worse, and it does. So as night approached, because remember, it's January, so the days are not very long. As night approached, temperatures fell. So the rescue efforts were hampered because it got thicker and stickier the colder it got. So 21 people and several horses were killed and 150 people were injured. I'm actually surprised there weren't more people killed. Yeah. Some victims were so coated in molasses that they were impossible to identify. At least a couple were swept into Boston Harbor and weren't found until 4 or 5 months later.
Well, did any of the molasses go into the harbor? Because how do you even get that out of the cold winter water? You don't. You just wait. A bank of molasses.
I didn't go far enough. I would love to have read what the impact on the water on the harbor was. Yeah. But I haven't gone down that route yet. So the first responders to the scene were 116 cadets from the USS Nantucket, which was a training ship docked at a nearby pier. So they heard the explosion and just ran toward it. Yeah. Some of them waded knee deep into the molasses to pull people out. Others held back passersby so that the other emergency responders could get in. Of course, back then they weren't called emergency responders. The Boston police showed up, the Red Cross, the Army, and the Navy. They said there were Red Cross nurses diving into the molasses to pull people out. Yikes. A field hospital had to be set up in a nearby building. They worked through the night and continued search and rescue efforts for 4 days.
I mean, there couldn't have been anybody alive in it once it hardened. Could there? I mean, there's no oxygen. Some people drowned. I can't imagine. Drowning in water sounds horrible enough. But imagine drowning in something that thick. Mm-mm. Maybe it'd be faster, though.
I don't know.
I'm just going to say that because I want to think that.
If anybody out there is a medical expert and knows the answer, please let us know. Some people were caught in the flow and slammed against a building or telephone pole and injured or killed that way. Just the weight of the stuff. Mm-hmm. So in the aftermath, they used a fireboat and salt water to clean away the molasses, and sand was used to absorb it. Okay. The harbor was brown with molasses into the summer. Ugh. Can you imagine? Mm. Cleanup of the immediate area took weeks, but cleaning up all of Boston took even longer. And while you're thinking, why would you need to clean up all of Boston? Here's why. The rescue workers, the victims, the cleanup crews, and the looky-loos had tracked molasses through the streets and spread it everywhere.
Oh, did they? It was like the stone, like the cobble.
Oh, yes.
Stone
it was
roads and
on
stuff.
the train platforms. It was on seats inside trains and streetcars.
Oh, people.
It was on, they had payphone handsets. It was inside homes. And apparently, the legend is that the scent of molasses lingered in the area for decades.
I wouldn't doubt it. Like on a hot day, it's baked down into some stones or whatever. Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
So some factors that played into the accident: the tank itself was poorly constructed and was never thoroughly tested and might have leaked since it was built. So if the molasses in the tank had begun to ferment, carbon dioxide production could have increased the pressure inside the tank. No safety tests were performed. Like, I don't know.
Well, did they ever?
Well, like filling the tank with water just to see if it leaked. Hey, why not? It was said that it leaked so badly. Okay, two things. It leaked so much. A, they painted the outside of the tank brown to disguise the leaks. Oh, my God. And local children...
That's one solution.
Yeah, local children would bring cups to catch the drips and get the sweet treat. Mm-hmm. A 2014 investigation, probably part of that same one I mentioned before, revealed that the steel was half as thick as it should have been, even by 1919 standards.
All right.
Even then, because the guy they had overseeing the construction was not an engineer or an architect, or he was like a finance guy. Other building materials were also flawed. So there's a lot I cannot explain about fluid dynamics and the physics involved, including that molasses is a non-Newtonian liquid that moved like a gravity current. Ugh. Yeah, I can't. I looked it up. I tried really hard for you, but I cannot explain that. But I can tell you, for a bit of levity, I can tell you that ketchup is also a non-Newtonian liquid.
And they have whole commercials about... trying to get that ketchup.
Yeah. That's the only time you're ever going to hear me sing.
Liar.
Not you. I bet. Yeah, it's still
no, we've done it on the podcast. You're a liar. Nice try.
Okay. A friend once said to me, "You're a big fat liar." And I looked at her and I said, "You think I'm fat?" Don't care about the liar part. So anyway, but something positive came out of this. In the aftermath, residents brought a class action lawsuit against the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, who had purchased Purity Distilling 2 years earlier in 1917. This was one of the first class action lawsuits, and it paved the way for modern corporate regulations. Testimony was gathered from thousands of expert witnesses, and it was the first time, I think they said it was the first time they really used expert witnesses. And it took years, resulting in 20,000 pages of conflicting testimony. Mm-hmm. While the company claimed that the tank had been blown up by anarchists, which was not as far-fetched as it seems in 1919.
Well, you said there are a lot of things going on, but still.
Anarchist bombings was one of them. The court eventually found the company liable, and the relatives of those killed received $7,000 per victim, which was a lot of money back then. So there is a guy, Stephen Puleo, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, wrote a book called Dark Tide, The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919.
He missed an opportunity to say molasses.
Kurt, he did. But what his quote, "All the things we now take for granted in the business, that architects need to show their work, that engineers need to sign and seal their plans, that building inspectors need to come out and look at projects, all of that comes about as a result of the Great Boston Molasses Flood case."
Okay. I mean, there's the thing is that at this point, when you learn about business, it's basically a science. Yes. You know, how the dynamics of a business work at this point. But every single thing in there can be traced back to, like, the guy that I talked about in Florida, and you talked about somebody who had worked with them too. So many things came about because of what they did to change business. It's really interesting, actually, reading about what changes what.
Yeah, it's interesting to trace it back and see, course, where did this come from.
Now that business is a science, now it all comes down to what warning labels do we put on for the stupidity that happens despite what the companies do to try to keep.
Well, because every ridiculous law or every ridiculous rule,
there's a reason.
There is a reason. I have people come in. Y'all know I work in a retail shop, so we had sign. We had to put a sign up. While the first time, I'll go with the first time we had to wear masks because I'm pretty sure it's going to come around again. It said you may not try on masks. And now people come in and they laugh. People laugh at that and they're like, oh, ha, 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 you had to put up a sign. And I look at them and I say,
yeah, we did.
I had to put up a sign. And they all go, oh. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. I didn't even, oh, Jesus. This woman she tried it on over her mask. So putting the outward facing dirty part of her mask. The bacteria
would be on.
Over the part of the mask that would be against someone's mouth. And I was like, yeah.
People are
I'm a big one for making signs at work. Fortunately, for the good of all, I'm not allowed to put them on.
I had to do that at the restaurant, but it was usually geared toward the employees.
Yes.
Like, not comprehending that leaving the back door propped open was dangerous at a place that took in money. It was also against health.
Really? Oh my God.
Laws. So, just to throw that out there. But I had to put a thing on the door saying, stop propping the door open. You are let in bugs.
Yep.
In a restaurant, and that door led to the kitchen. And so here's something. On Halloween, when I was still working there, some dude came in the back door. I wasn't there. There wasn't a manager there. So it was the server and the busser and the cook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And this dude walks in the back door and he's pacing. There was this tiny, tiny little hallway because you had the back area that had a freezer and the sinks and prep area, and then you had the kitchen, and then you go out front. And it led to where people were sitting. And he's there, and he's peeking around the corner. He's staring at this table in particular. And the server goes back there. It was all guys there. Wasn't it? Or I think the busser was female.
But still.
But she was very young. And the server goes back there, and he was so pissed at himself because he was like, what was I even thinking? He walks back and he says, can I get you a glass of water? And the guy said, sure. And so we got him a glass of water. Anyway, and then he's like, what's going on? Because the guy's pacing and mumbling to himself and peeking. And he's like, oh, well, so what's going on, man? So he was this really laid back guy. He works in Manitou now. He lives there. Manitou is very hippie, mountain hippie.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, hey, basically it all came down to his girlfriend was up there having a meal with coworkers, and he felt she was cheating with the guy next to her, the coworker. And so he was spying on her. Anyway.
Yeah.
Big nasty situation. And I was like, yeah, at that point, I said, did you go up and tell the woman that the boyfriend was creeping back there at the very least? And he was like, no, because I was afraid it would blow up.
Wow.
So then eventually he's like, hey man, you can't be back here. And the guy leaves and he shuts the door and latches it. And the guy's out there and the server can see him pacing around outside, but the woman still hasn't seen him.
Oh my God.
And so it was this whole big freaky incident, and they didn't call the cops and they didn't say anything to her still. And I was like, you guys kind of just bunged this up all
yeah, you kind of
from all different angles, and you're lucky he didn't have a weapon.
Yeah.
But after that, I was like, we need to have a meeting. And you know what? They stopped propping the door open for like a week.
Oh.
It was so frustrating. It was like, you guys, if we have a health inspector come, we're going to get dinged for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were right next to a gas station, and we were on a road that comes from Garden of the Gods and Highway 24.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that far from I-25. So in other words, we were in a really good spot for somebody to pull over at that gas station, see a back door, and go, I'm going to walk over there and rob this place.
Yeah.
So, we didn't get robbed, but I was like, you guys are asking for it. And the whole time I was there, like, every time I was there, I would go back and shut the door, and then I'd come back and it would be propped open, and then I'd bitch at people. I'd shut it, and it would stay shut for the rest of that, maybe. But then at the same time, the owners had, like, there was a air compressor that we had that they would leave outside, and the cord would have to come in. So then it would be propped open anyway. And I'm like, well, let's just keep breaking the law. Cool.
Yeah.
They still do it. I went over there.
Did you say they sold it?
Yep. New owners at the restaurant I worked at. Jeff and I went there for drinks when we got back from Breckenridge.
How was it?
Good. They have some new stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
So it was nice going there. Eventually, there's only 2 people there who know who I am anymore. Eventually, I'll once again be a stranger there, which will be nice, I guess.
You'll be anonymous.
Yes. So, all right. We talked a lot. We had some dark stories.
We did.
If you have a food mayhem story that you feel that MB needs to do on here, you should really send it to us so that
I
it's
would
on our radar.
love to.
I mean, maple syrup heists, molassacres, Waffle House. Yep. Come on now. Give her some ideas.
I've been telling Waffle House stories since we recorded that. Because we'll be sitting... you would be surprised how often that can be worked into conversation.
I can. I think I've even had a conversation about it with somebody since then.
And Tim Hortons just doesn't stack up. Canadians are just too darn nice.
We didn't think of a question. So I'm going to say some stuff and you think while I'm saying some stuff.
Oh, bitch.
Oh, so anyway, you can send us questions or your own stories. They don't have to be related to anything that we've said by sending it to mysteriesmonstersmayhem@gmail.com. You can go to our website. There is a form there. There's other information. We post the titles, at least, of the episodes coming up there. And that is mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com. So we want your stories. You can also look up if we've had guests, we have a page on there. So if you want to find out more about a guest that we had on here, then you can go there and see a lovely picture of them and have a face to go with the person talking. Did you think of a question yet?
I did.
Awesome.
It's a silly question.
Do it.
Because of the molasses. You know I have a one-track mind.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get me into a different once I'm in it. So I just want to know, because it's this big sticky wave of death. I want to know what your favorite sweet treat is.
What's your favorite sweet treat? And that'll be posted on our Facebook page. And I think I actually post those to Instagram too. So.
And for you, it would be something with chocolate in it. Definitely not fruit.
Absolutely. Dessert. Fruit doesn't belong on dessert. I want to eat my fruit separate. I hate whenever I go to a restaurant and all they have is like fruity stuff and stuff with nuts. I'm like, you've lost me.
Whereas I take a much broader approach to dessert.
You know what? And so, but my family actually really likes like lemon type things. So lemon bars and I'm just, so Jeff will get that every once in a while and I'm all, well, at least I get to save those calories because I'm not eating that shit.
But I don't go for custard.
No.
Flan. No.
Flan. No, I don't like those things either, though. No. It's just the taste, not the consistency. But like when we were in Georgia, nobody had chocolate dessert, and there wasn't ice cream. Oh. There was one ice cream place in Savannah, and that was it. I mean, here in Colorado, where we're cold half the year, there's so much ice cream.
And in the South, you get a lot of bread pudding.
I don't like it.
I don't either.
And a lot of pecan stuff. Yes. I mean, primarily pecan pie, but pecan stuff. I think the closest any of it had to chocolate was caramel, but it always came with nuts. I don't like nuts, and those also don't belong in my dessert. They don't.
I'll have to make you some chocolate caramel brownies.
Yeah, you'll have to. That's it.
But anyway, I will leave the pecans out of it.
Thank you. Nuts are not sweet. Don't put that in my dessert. Damn it. But yeah, it does save me calories at restaurants. It's a major pet peeve of mine. It's like having onions in everything.
I know.
And hey, that's valid because onions give me migraines too. Like they trigger the migraine. But anyway, since I forgot to say it the last 2 times, it does help us immensely if you like, rate, follow, review, share. Get us out there because, our audience grows a little bit.
Yep.
It would be nice to have a...
Tell your friends you listen to these 2 crazy women talking about pretty much everything.
About bullshit and then murder and mayhem.
And if they want to suggest something they want to hear us talk about, we pretty much will.
Email us. That's right. Or send us your stories and we'll read them as long as they're not insanely long. Because if we print it up and it's as long as what we're telling, it's not going to get read on here. But if it's shorter, we totally will.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for listening.
Have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.